You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are doing very well. And before we get to it this week, a lot of you have sent me the New York Times Magazine article asking for my thoughts on it. And the article, for those who missed it, is Women Have Been Misled About Menopause. Hot flashes, sleeplessness, pain during sex. For some of menopause's worst symptoms, there's an established treatment. Why aren't more women offered it? First, I'll say it's an incredibly well done piece, and it pretty much encapsulates all of what we've been talking about for these 2+ years and continue to talk about. They interviewed a number of our past guests, including Dr. Mary Jane Minkin, Dr. Stephanie Falbian, and Dr. Avram Blooming of Estrogen Matters. The article basically makes it clear that it's absolute bullshit that women are still fighting their doctors for menopausal hormone therapy. The author herself describes how she goes to her doctor with hot flashes and brain fog and other concerns, and her doctor basically says, that's normal aging, and that we only prescribe hormones for significant symptoms. And my head exploded. Like, who is to tell you what significant symptoms are? If you are having your life disrupted, it is significant. Full stop. It makes me insane that we are still being treated like children, and the whole thing just makes me super angry. I am very glad to see that menopause is finally getting this level of expository journalism in the mainstream, and I am confident that it will make a difference and things will continue to improve in that regard. I also want to take a moment and just reiterate some of the points I've made in past shows, that it is also okay if you don't want hormone therapy. As I've seen in our private group of more than 20,000 women, not everyone does well on it. For some women, 100% is a lifesaver, and many women do spectacularly on it. But not everyone does, and not everyone feels like they need it. And I'm one of them. I feel great. My Ironman training is going super well. I sleep like a sack of stones. My health is good. I'm happy. My mind is clear. And I personally don't want to rock the boat by introducing hormone therapy. And I hear from a lot of other women who are in sort of this same boat. Like, maybe they did have some symptoms and they've gotten through it and now they feel great, or they don't feel like their symptoms are really bothering them, but they're scared now that maybe they need to take it, or they're doing themselves a disservice, or their health will suffer. And, in the end, I think we just need to remember that hormone therapy is just that. It's a therapy. It's one very, very good tool in a box of many, many tools that includes lifestyle and exercise and nourishment and social contact and mindfulness and environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just have this dream that every woman will have access to all of these tools that she can choose from and what works best for her, that can help her feel and perform her best. So those are my thoughts on that New York Times piece. And I definitely check it out. It was super, super well done. All right. Speaking of feeling and performing your best, this week's guest, Kristin DiDomenico, author of Dying to Be Enough, has been on quite the journey to get there herself. Like many women, Kristin's life has taken her on an all too common journey through the relentless pursuit of perfection. And for Kristin, that involved battling years of bulimia and other eating disorders and addiction, getting blackout drunk, all while being a very high achieving athlete. She shares all about all of that this week. Today, Kristin is on a mission to use what she's learned to empower women in menopause to feel amazing with a balanced life strategy. She is a certified integrative health and nutrition coach and personal trainer with an expertise in women's hormonal health. You can buy her book on Amazon. You can follow her on Instagram at Kristin Fitness. And you can learn more about her coaching programs at menopausepartner.com, which she playfully describes as me no pause. I'll put links to all of that in the show notes to make it super easy to find. As always, I invite you to sign up for my free weekly newsletter at feistymenopause.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Feisty Menopause, and of course, join our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group. If you want a deeper dive into all of that, we have a Level Up membership where we meet with experts several times a month to dive into hormones and nutrition and training and mindset and all of that. Highly recommend checking it out. That's also at feistymenopause.com. Okay, super quick thanks to That's It for coming on as a sponsor of the show. I have been loving their mini fruit bars on my long rides and runs. I especially like the Fig Probiotics bars because they're easy on my belly and provide great energy. So thanks, That's It, for your support. All right, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Kristin, I am very glad that you reached out to me and shared your story because I think, as we were talking about right before I hit record, this whole feeling of not being enough is something I think that many people, especially in our generation, probably women of all generations, but certainly in our generation, struggle with, and it has such consequences throughout life. And then coming into this transitionary period where the ground starts shifting underneath us, I think it can be even worse. So I'm excited for this conversation, and I'm really glad to be here with you.
Oh, I'm super excited too to be here with you, Celine.
Cool. Well, let's set the stage for a life of feeling like you're not enough, which can lead women to constantly be trying to prove something that
Mm,
I feel they never actually accomplish because the goalposts, you know how it is, they just keep
mm,
shifting in your mind. Like you get to the place where you're like, this is what I've been going for. And you're like, oh, I'm still here.
right.
Maybe it's something else I need to do to
Ah,
be comfortable with me. So you started out, which, you know, when I saw it was figure skating, I'm like, well, of course. Just like, because that there are some sports that really can set that stage. And
mm.
it seems to me that figure skating is one that can really plant those seeds and really fertilize them. So can you talk a bit about coming up in that sport?
Yeah, well, growing up, we had an ice rink at the end of our street when I was really young. And it was the day Peggy Fleming in the Olympics and coming up on the heels of or then Dorothy Hamill was my idol. And at a young age, I think I was 9 years old when I first started taking lessons. I still remember showing up at the rink, and it was, they were doing a spin, and I looked around like I had no idea. Like I was like, what the heck? I felt like, you know, everybody knew the dance steps and I had no clue. And I remember being uncomfortable, but having this desire to figure it out, like I had the goal in my brain that I wanted to go to the Olympics. That was what I wanted. I wanted to be Peggy Fleming. I wanted to then be Dorothy Hamill, like so many other girls my age at that time. Anyway, one thing led to the next, and I actually got pretty good at it, and there was a lot going on. I mean, I think it's looking back at that time in my life, I was driven as a kid. I just always had this kind of singular focus. I wasn't much into team sports. I wasn't, um, this was my goal and it was my dream. And at a young age, I kind of had that vision for myself. And I had my dad as my huge cheerleader, kind of cheering me on through it and encouraging me. And, he would get up with me for those early practices and drive me before school and after school. And, and then there came a point where he was approached by a coach and just, who wanted me to come live with her and train because she thought I had what it took, and I was elated, it was like in a way, I mean, there was a lot going on in my family at the time too, behind the scenes. And I had a brother that had special needs who needed a lot of attention. My dad had a job that demanded a lot of his attention. So it was kind of a win-win for everybody. Like here, I would move away, live with a coach, in theory, right? But we kind of forgot along the way, I was this little girl, right? And here it was like, oh, we'll ship her off. And I was like, yes, this is all I want. And so I did it, I did it. And, that was a big, a challenging time, let's say. I kept striving to perform because now I had all this, my family was supporting me and they were backing me. They thought, okay, now she's going to go do this thing. And so I put my all into it. But behind the scenes, it's kind of like all the underlying, developmental things that happened at that point in my life, which I didn't, it was kind of just, I just wanted to win and whatever it took. And so, and then I went from I went in when I was about 12 years old. I moved away from home. And then I got into 13, 14, I was still there. And I started to want to go out with friends and do other things. And I really couldn't do that because of my training, and it was so intense and very structured. So everything was very structured, very from what I ate to, my timing of schoolwork and everything. So anyway, so that became, the sole focus. I started I moved away from going to public school into a private school with only, I think we had some tennis players, some gymnasts and skaters, and it was very small and very, it was private so that I could skate more and train more. And so, that was the world I was in. And then it was really about competing, traveling to compete, which my family would come and meet me there for the competitions. They'd go back and I'd go back to living my life I was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. That's where my coach was. So that's where I lived and trained, and so it was very intense, very intense. I didn't have much else beside that. And when I would socialize with other skaters. So all my friends were also my competitors. So it's all I knew. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of that, all I knew. And then I got injured, and the injury kind of came on the heels of probably some overtraining. I started to go on a diet because I was, it's all about appearance on the ice, and not uncommon for the sport. And
did somebody put you on that diet?
Yes. So here's what happened. First off, I started to realize while I was there over a while, I wasn't the best. I wasn't the highest jumper. I had my skills. I had some things, I was really good at back in the day. They used to do figure eights, figures. Yeah. They don't do that any longer, but I was really good at the compulsory. I was really good at that. But anyway, point being that wasn't going to win you the Olympics, right? And so I realized I didn't quite measure up in this pool of amazing skaters, right? And then the diet came. Then it's like, okay, we're going to kind of go on this. We need to, really, everybody, I want to lose weight. And we had weigh-ins and stuff. Well, I was going to be the best at that. So I took that and ran with it, and started to get accolades for it, right? Like, wow, Kristin, look at, you're really following the regimen. And it became an obsession for me. It became, where I felt out of control, I think. And I mean, I had coaches telling me what to do. The family I lived with, the mom in that family had really taken it upon herself for me to be her prodigy. Like, I was not only going to be my parents, but I was going to be her skater now. Throw in there, she had a daughter who skated, but wasn't quite didn't really care about it. So there was, I mean, living in that house, I just go back to like, wow, like shit show. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say shit show, but it was. But anyway, so I was put on a diet and took it to the extreme. I mean, I was, that was all I had then, right? So I would count calories, I would do calisthenics and get on the scale, and like, it was like, okay, look at this, I'm doing this. And unfortunately I got injured. Surprise, surprise, right? Lack of nutrients and, not supporting my body, which, overtraining and, all of that. So, and looking back at that for me, unfortunately, my desire to compete had kind of waned away. It wasn't, I was a teenager. I wanted this real life, but I realized at the same time I was so strapped into it at that point. I felt like there was no way out.
Right.
I had to keep doing this. And so the injury was, I always, even through the I had surgery and I was going to come back because I was.
What was the injury?
So it was the sheathing. I tore the sheathing of my peroneal tendon, which is in the ankle. I mean, but there were things behind the scene, like I got cortisone shots and they were putting me back out on the ice. I mean, it was just like at all costs, because this was my year. So here I was losing all this weight, pressure on. This was the year I was going to go to nationals. I was going to get in the juniors. I was going to go to, this was it. And so there was this like pressure, and I don't have the desire, like the passion was, so it was this, anyway, so, so there was that. And then, I literally, it was a scene, right? I was on the ice competing, and in the middle of the competition, like my leg just gave out. Like literally I ended up going from skating in the middle of a program to crutches. And, so there's a word that my mom always used for me. It was called, she said, Kristin is psychomotor gifted. Other people might, you might look at like, what, like there's no such word, first of all. But I think a lot of us in the world of sport and competition, we go beyond, like we can disconnect from our body in a way that allows us to kind of push through and do what we need to do until we can't. So that was my last skating competition. And yeah, in a sense, that was all I knew. That was what I had. And I remember my dad, speaking of that, he was my biggest cheerleader. I'll never forget me walking off with my mom to her car on crutches, and my dad just looking down like just like that. Oh, well, and whether he did that or not, Celine, I don't really know, but that's what I felt as a 15-year-old girl, right?
He did not do that.
You're probably right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
So But the eating behavior
Mm.
persisted, right? Even
Yeah, it got worse actually before. Yeah, so I came home after living away from home and going through puberty. By the way, getting my period in the stall of some random skating rink, having no idea because, we didn't talk about that stuff. And anyway, and yeah, coming home and just being thrown into real life, which, I was isolated in my own on
right.
my own track, and yet being a star, right? Coming back into the hometown, right? Oh, here I was, and then going through surgery and realizing I would never skate again. So there was still this kind of hope, and yet,
Mm.
so it was a weird sense of relief and loss, right? It was like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. And yet, who am I? This is who I am. And so that's where certainly the eating, I was originally like anorexic, right? And then I kind of got into um bulimia, like the
Mhm.
binging and the purging, and and then starting to use exercise a little bit, um but very sporadically. I smoked cigarettes. I mean, I got into some real unhealthy patterns, and then in high school and in drinking, and that created a whole nother shit show that I it just from a pretty young age didn't work for me. Um and it was all intertwined, right? It was all this just I didn't know how to show up in a way that I was just Kristin. All I knew how to be was Kristin the skater. And so it was a long transition. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. Um, where I kind of learned that, I didn't need to have, you know, that identity. And I mean, years, right? Because, and I think for me, the challenge has been not looking for some external definition for my identity. I'm Kristin the skater, I'm Kristin the triathlete, I'm Kristin the, you know, this or that. I always have needed that external kind of affirmation or identity, and like an external identity, instead of just being like, you know what, I'm okay as I am without having, winning races or winning competitions. And I grew up, it was that you are what you do, you are what you do, you are what you do. That was the mantra, unfortunately. But, you know, yeah.
Well, let's talk a bit about that because you are not alone. Eating disorders and drinking and all these things go hand in hand for a lot of women, especially like you're saying that the perfectionist tendency and the tendency to like achieve and be very, very attached to your accomplishments and stay in these tight lanes of
Yeah.
performance and all of that. And you can only stay in those lanes for so long and your brain goes flying off the rails and then you go back and like it,
Mm,
it's a very common pattern. Um and you see it also in people who find endurance sports.
mm.
So, and when did you find endurance sports? It sounds like you sort of found it in your young adulthood, you got married, you started the family, yet a lot of these behaviors are still persisting all at the same time, which had to have been pretty intense.
Yeah. 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 And it was. And I feel as though it was like a game of whack-a-mole. Like I would go over here and I'd pop that one up. And then and not to use Brene Brown, who I love, she uses the term poo-poo platter of addiction. And that is exactly, I'm like, I could go over here, 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 which is, you know, so endurance sports, um, for me started interestingly because I got into teaching aerobics, right? I
Right?
was, so that got me into
As
it.
so many
Okay.
of us did.
I'm like, excuse me. So I started teaching aerobics, right? And then spinning came on the
Oh,
scene.
I was a spin instructor too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually still teach crazy, right? But I love it and I do it very differently today. But
Yeah.
um, I was that kicked my butt and I was like, I gotta get this, so it became so that led me out onto the road, onto a bike. And I happened to be a really great cyclist, right? I was like, all of a sudden, I'm like, I can ride a bike. I mean, my first biking race literally was on a borrowed bike. And I went into like it was like a cat one. I don't know. It was like one of, my two little kids came. I didn't even have a jersey. I showed up in like my little aerobic, strappy
Oh
bra,
my God,
whatever
I
they
did the
say. And
same
I'm like,
thing.
yeah. Oh my gosh. They're like, you have to have your shoulders
Yeah,
covered.
oh my God, I had to cut my race. They gave me those crappy t-shirts, and I
Yeah.
had to wear that underneath what I was wearing because I didn't read the book. I didn't know you were supposed to cover your shoulders either.
Oh, shoulders and then gloves. I think you needed gloves. And I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. And so luckily, right, there's a cycling shop right down the street. And anyway, it was like a big, and I didn't even know the race was like a big deal or there was money. So anyway, I'll never forget that. And my two little kids are watching, and the pack, like I went from the spinning bike to like, what the heck? I'll show up. I'll do anything. I mean, into this like hairpin turn where they've got, the hay. And I'm like, I waited. Like, so the pack went. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't even know. Right. But the funniest thing is, Celine, I end up catching the lead freaking pack. Sorry. I end up catching the pack and they're like, who are you? And where are you? Anyway, I was hooked, right? I'm like, I'm going to join a team, anyway, we're getting kind of off but
No, that's
point
okay.
being, it's that like, I'm going to grab on. Like, so for me, endurance sports, and I actually started out more of a runner, but it was, it was kind of this, chasing that high for me in a way. It was sorry, but it was this like adrenaline rush and this state of like being good at something, right? I always just I want to be good at something. Um but it's never good enough. And that was my issue is I loved it, and yet I took that as it became, um, more of it went from the challenge to performing. It was like I have to perform. And so, for me, and then, the running got into marathoning, and then the cycling got into, racing, and which I did enjoy. And I really loved competing. I'm a competitor, right? So I love to compete. And then got into triathlon, eventually. So it was kind of this, aerobics to showing up, at these races, and then coaching and teaching all through that as well. So, this kind of doing my own thing, and then coaching others, and then but it just kept getting to be, endurance sports, right? I started with a 5K, right? And then it became, and just kind of continuing on, to where I just did more and more.
And you are still struggling with an eating disorder and binge drinking during this time?
Yeah. 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 So I was, yeah, it was a lot of extreme, it was extreme working out. Um, the drinking for me was kind of where I turned off. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, it was like go, 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 go. And then I needed that to kind of calm myself down because I didn't quite have that switch internally. I only knew how to go. And so for me, and it didn't always look like a binge or over, like it could look normal, right? But I needed it every day.
Right.
Like, and that was kind of, and there were times when it would get out of control for sure. And that would be where I'd be like, how did that happen? Like, what? You know, so there was that. Yeah. And the binging came along with that. It was almost like I'd stop drinking, I'd eat, and then I'd eat and I'd vomit or whatever.
Right.
It's like this cycle of just, and then I'd get up the next day and be like, okay, today I'm not going to do that. I'm going to control. And I think for me, that's really the issue was, and I go back to the skating and each stage of my life, racing, I'm gonna, I remember bargaining with God. All I wanted to do was break 40 for a 10K because I love speed, right? For a while, I really like to go fast. And I said, I'll stop drinking. I'm like making these if and sure enough, guess what? I made it it had nothing, 39, whatever. I did a 10K at age whatever in my 40s. But there was the next. It never, for that moment, it was awesome. And then what's next?
Right. Right.
That control, like thinking, that illusion of control, Celine. I didn't realize it was all an illusion until, I did. So that's.
And when did you realize it was all an illusion?
Well, that would be the day that I died. Yeah. That would be when. I mean, I hate to say it so,
Yeah.
but it's true. And
so let's talk about that day because most people don't get to talk about the day that they died.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And to just set the stage a little bit, I had
Sure.
been sober for a total of 7 months at that
Okay.
point. And I just because it's an important, I don't talk about this much, but it is important. And the reason being is the drinking stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just throw in there, I was 47 years old, which that's a point I definitely want to circle back to. But I stopped drinking. And remember what drinking was my off.
Yeah.
And what happened is my training ramped up. I fired my coach because all I wanted to do, I was like, I have to work out because I had no other release.
Great.
Okay. And yeah, so that day, what had happened leading up to, I had a woman that was mentoring me and working with me on the inside job stuff. And she said, I said, I really have to, my working out has taken over and I'm afraid. And she said, and not that I'm a spiritual person, so I have a higher power that more than ever after what happened to me, I definitely believe. But she said, well, turn it over, see what, just maybe you can ask, just to be helped, right? Like from whatever, just to let go of it a little bit. Well, watch what you ask for, because I'll tell you what, I did not see this coming. And yet, it changed my life forever. And so I guess I'll just get into what happened on that day. I run, by the way, and you asked this question, how many races? And hundreds. 2 Ironman triathlons. I'm not great at the long distance, but I did it, and I'm like a mid distance. So this was the 10 miler, the half marathon, half Ironman. I like those. But anyway, it was a 10 miler I was doing with a bunch of friends. Again, remember, I wasn't, Oh, at this time, I wasn't really competing. I had just done a triathlon and actually, won my age group, right? Whatever. But I was like, this is, but I'm always in the back of my mind, like, I want to get on the podium. But it was really anyway. So we show up, couple weird things, like my race number was like 696. I know it's not the, and I don't usually think anything, but I was like, that's weird. I'm like, I actually went up because then there were tables. You had to actually, it was a trail race, right? So I went up and I'm like, is there any chance I could change my number? I don't feel good about this. And they're like, oh no, sorry, whatever. So I'm like, all right. And we were joking. I was joking with my friends and somebody's like, oh, Kristin, give it to me. I'll race with your number. And then we were like, well, no, we better not, just in case, But weird things. I left for that morning before my friends picked me up. And I'm like, my husband always came. He was always like my cheerleader and he wasn't coming. And I said to him, like, what if something happens? And, like, what? Like, anyway, and I'll go back to what I shared about getting on the ice and not recognizing that my leg was going to give out that day. There were things going on. I was clueless. Like, of course, I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to have gastric distress. I mean, it was a lot. I was running into the woods and I'm like, that's weird, but that happens when you're racing. That's kind of a normal, unfortunate thing as women, sometimes for most of us. But anyway, it was just, I pushed through. I push through. I don't pay attention, right? I'm like, just keep going. And so that's what I did. And I didn't see it coming. All I know is 1 minute I was running and the next minute I wasn't. And it was a 10-mile race. It was at about mile 9.75. And I dropped and, that was it. And it just so happened that a doctor was running within 3 minutes behind me. And the reason I share 3 minutes is because their survival rate is like 2%, if that. And he happened to show up at the right time. And there was a group of runners around too, trying to, at the time they were like, nobody knew. And I didn't look like somebody that it would be a hurt,
Right.
They thought maybe I hit my head and he knew right away and he went right at it and started doing, he felt for a pulse. God, it makes my heart like, it's a little hard to talk about. But I'm here to talk about it. So, it's important. And,
so he performed CPR.
He performed CPR. They happen to have, I was close enough to the finish line. They had
an AED.
Portable defibrillator, and they got my heart going again. And they got me in the ambulance came and got me to the ICU, and they didn't know. He still, he said he didn't know if I was going to make it. And honestly, Celine, I think the hardest thing in that gap right there was for my family. I didn't, apparently in the ambulance, I was fighting off the oxygen quite a bit. Like, no. And they were like, Kristin, stay with us, whatever. The weird thing later on, it came to me, like, I remembered people being around me on the trail when let me go back to that for a second, because so what was happening around me, I was aware of. I knew there were people there. I knew what was happening. I don't remember the doctor, by the way. So
Were you out of body? I mean, did you like it sounds so dumb to ask this, but
no,
like
and
were
I
you
know
looking
it.
down on yourself? Did you see a
No,
light? You know, all the things
no, no,
that
no.
people
I
talk
know.
about.
No, people
Okay.
ask me that. They're like, "Did you see a light?" And so
Yeah.
let me take you there, because all I remember were people around me. And it was weird because I remembered the rustling of the leaves. It was in the fall. It was in October, and them being in chaos, like looking at their phones, like, what do we do? And I remember not being able to speak, but wanting to say, do something, do something, do something. Like that was like, I was urgently, and I don't remember being in any pain or anything. I just want to, but I remember the point where I realized they weren't doing anything and that I was going to pass. Like I remember, and it was not like, oh, here I go. It was like this. I had to let go. I had to let go of everything. I wasn't in control. I didn't choose that. It wasn't like, I'm going to let go of control now. It was like, I didn't have a fucking choice. I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. And it really, whatever. It was what it was. And then I didn't have a choice. I want to make sure I say that without, and then, you know, that's all I remember. But from there, so then I mean, that's all I remember as of the being somewhat aware. And then, I mean, then I guess the doctor I don't remember the doctor. I don't remember any of that. I didn't have any awareness. So I passed through, and what I felt was, you know, this letting go of all the, you know, the pain and the struggle and I mean, it was as if it was being lifted out of me. You know, all the challenges, you know, we all go through, but it was as if, it was being taken away. And I felt that light cushioning, that, you know, that kind of like I was being held, and I felt like weightless, that like lightness, that just like I was on a really soft pillow. And then so so that was what my experience was. And then, you know, was there a white light? I don't, it was all white. And then I saw my dad. Like that was the ooh. So I went into this other space, wherever that was, and he was kind of
Is your dad alive, or is he not with
dead.
us
He's
anymore?
passed. So my
Okay.
dad
Okay.
passed. And we had a really tumultuous relationship, up and down. And, you know, after I stopped skating and I had the eating
Yeah.
disorder, he was like done with me, you know. Anyway, but he showed up. He had been dead. He had died in 2007. And so this was, you know, 7 years later ish. Anyway, and it was weird because it was like he was in this room and I was kind of over in this other area. I swear it was and it was red. The walls were red where he was. I don't know where, I was just over here. And there wasn't like we were having a discussion. He just said, you know, I love you and I'm worried about you. And that was it. You know, whether it was whatever, I don't know why I expressed that, or if I have, you know, I don't have any proof. I don't have any, you know, but you know, that was my experience. And then, you know, that was it. Then I came back in and I was in the, you know, on the gurney or whatever, I were in the ICU, and my daughter was there holding my hand, and I came back through, and it was like a weird, like it felt like a vacuum kind of thing. It was weird coming back, and her hand, and I said, "Is that my daughter?" Like right away. And then of course, like you know, after racing, what's the first thing I said is, "Does anybody have a foam roller? Because I'd like to roll things out." I mean, that's what I kid you
I
not. And
thought you were going to be like, what was my time? Did I finish?
yeah, that there was that next, like really, like, and then we were gonna go for pancakes. I'm like, we got to still go to Silver Diner for pancakes. I mean, come on, that's that. Like, okay, let's move on. I'm good. I'm here.
Right.
Like, but once I did that, everybody, my husband was there, and he's like, all right, she's here, she's back, and but I'm very lucky. I mean, so the thing is, I don't know where you want to go from here, maybe to talking about, being 47
Well,
and
yeah, I mean, I have a couple of questions. I mean, one
okay.
is like, obviously you are 47. Were you having any sort of
Mm,
perimenopausal stuff at that time? And what actually happened? I mean, did you have some sort of congenital heart issue? I mean,
yeah.
you are quite young,
Yeah.
even given, a history that could set you, the stage for not the healthiest cardiovascular health, but
Right.
still, I mean, you're still
Yeah.
quite young.
Right. Right. So I will tell you that this incident yeah, what happened to me, which is pretty major. I went to the best of the doctors, and what do they say? We don't really know. And the main reason is most women at this age, in this stage, who this happens to,
Hmm. Don't make it.
take it. Yeah. So, so wait, what was I want to make sure I'm answering your
Well,
question.
did you have an existing heart
Oh,
condition?
yes. Okay. So first off, and my dad had passed from a heart attack, and I had some AFib, like early on, like some, racing, drinking heavily, eating disorder,
Right.
racing. I mean, not surprising. I had that, but no, they were like, nope, nothing. I mean, I'd gone
Yep.
through a lot of testing. I had also gone to Johns Hopkins right after my dad passed in 2007 and put my heart up on a screen. And he goes, wow. Like the doctor was like, yeah, oh my gosh, you're so strong. Look at this. And he said, you do have what's called an apical in the apex of the heart thickness. They thought it was athlete's heart. Very
Right.
like not uncommon. We overtrain that muscle.
Yep.
It's going to get bigger, right? It's like a bicep,
Oh,
but it's
yeah. Mhm.
the heart, yeah. And so he said, where the so it's a thickness in the heart, right? It's a wall, like the thickness in the wall, the apex of the left ventricle. So
Yep.
the danger isn't when it's on in a different space. So he said, this doctor, Johns Hopkins, said you would be more likely to die from stepping off a curb and getting hit by a bus than this. That was in 2007, right? All right, two more Ironman competitions. Right. I mean, how many times was I out in my woods? Like 10 miles, so way out there by myself. All right. So yes, I have this condition.
Okay.
It's called HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Mhm.
It's a big, it spans, there's lots of different variations of it, but it's the one that younger athletes generally die right away. Okay. Sudden cardiac death. As I've done some research, and because it has frustrated the heck out of me, as to why there's no answers. Like, and the frustration with how I've been medicated and treated, and I'm a man, right? I'm not a man, right? And so there is some research by the British Medical Journal and others that have shown that women in perimenopause with this condition can suffer severe symptoms, which the most severe
I
is
was gonna say, like,
yeah, sudden cardiac death. Now, let me just preface that this is the FDA not approved, so I go to my cardiologist, I bring it. Well, this isn't FDA approved. I get it. I get it. My thing is, yes, I was in perimenopause. Did I have any idea? Absolutely not. Were symptoms showing up for me? Was I having like heavier periods? Was I struggling a little bit more with weight? Were things shifting? I already have depression. I'm already been treated for that. So that's just part of the game. Was I, in hindsight? Yes. At the time, absolutely no idea what it even was. What it even was, Celine. I was 47, but I'm going to keep going like I was when I was 30 because that worked. Did it? Yeah. So it has become so paramount in my space and work that I get to do today that I'm like, look, this is so important that as women, we understand how this time in our life is, for life. I mean, we have to figure this out and understand it and bring it to the forefront so that more research can be done and more women can be alerted, and athletes, the heart when we, and this, not to get in, I don't, I'm not a doctor, but I know that losing estradiol, which is the main energy hormone that we get that fuels our heart to do the things we want to do, if there's something happening behind the scenes that is causing that up and down and we hit it at the right time, I think I'm super passionate about, being that cautionary tale, I guess, because I didn't know better. And I always thought, look at me, I'm able to compete and do all this stuff and I'm a picture of health. Not true, true to a certain degree, but I think those extremes and those things
Right.
that we internally struggle with and that keep pushing us to do more and be more. I mean, yeah, so that day it changed my trajectory forever. I mean, I didn't have it. I mean, it was life-changing, right? I had to figure out a different way. And I don't remember much from the hospital. People, because I was a little out of it and clearly, and a good friend of mine came, a very close friend. She sat there and I remember just bawling, just like, it was this, who am I? What do I do now? I don't have this, and I liken it to when I stopped skating, right? It was that same, it's like, here it is again. And sitting here with you today, I truly believe, I know this could sound crazy, but it was a gift because I get to be here and I get to help women in this. I didn't realize when I wrote the book, I didn't realize when I didn't know I was going to show up in menopause spaces. I didn't know, but I think that's the message, is we don't know. I think it's laid out there. You have done amazing, these things that we think we're going to wow the world in, or we're going to show up in a way, whether it's competing or whatever our drivenness takes us to. I think we don't know. We don't know how we're going to help others in that space. Eventually, I think, because I didn't, maybe you didn't probably know that
I
you
don't
were
know anything.
you're talking about menopause. I mean,
I just keep rolling with it, like where I find myself. But What happened then after you got out of the hospital? Like, what was the trajectory, and what does life look like now? I know you work and
Yeah.
train women in the menopause transition,
Mm.
but like, are you running? You know, I mean, what has it been like since that time?
So on the flip side of perimenopause here for me, it has been so I got out of the hospital and I'll tell you what, so I have I have an ICD, like
Mhm.
a implantable cardiac defibrillator,
Yep.
so that if my heart goes out of rhythm, it kicks it back. So I will tell you, I had a really rocky road coming back because I was in denial.
Mm.
I did not right away. I was not willing to accept. So I tell you, my life changed forever on that day, which it did, but it has been a journey to, I mean, I'm like, I'm not stopping because that was just a fluke. How could,
Right.
dying? I mean, come on. Well, I'll tell you what, this went off 6 times. 6 times since. So this happened though. This is important, I think, because yeah, and I tell you that like the last time, I'd say it's been a while. It's been about 5 years maybe since it's gone off. Interesting, the hormone.
I was just gonna ask that.
Oh, and it is typical that once we get through, once hormones start
Because
to
you're
settle,
postmenopausal now?
yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you it was like a switch went off,
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden, not, I mean, pretty noticeable. Uh, you know, I was starting to feel better. I was not fighting my body as much. I also went off my medications. So now I just have this, which it will save my life if necessary. I mean, it has, for sure. Um, but the last time what happened to me, I was on the treadmill and I was alone in my basement and I dropped and it went off, thank God.
You
And
dropped on the treadmill? Did you go
I
flying
went,
across your basement?
I was able to get
Okay.
off the treadmill.
All
No,
right.
no, no. Thank God. I felt it coming
Mm-hmm.
and I dropped to the floor. Do you want to hear the scariest part of that? Really? I looked at my watch and I was like, how much did I get in? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
So there's the crazy. The crazy's still there. Yeah. No, I'm not even joking. And,
I
get
know.
it. Okay. Because that was, oh, so it was that moment though that I'm like, I felt what that felt like. I knew what was happening. And I talked myself. I mean, it was that discussion of, oh, go to the bathroom. Oh, that's all that was. You just need, whatever. And it's this bargaining back and forth. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this. It's not working. Whether it was, but I was so challenged to really let go still. I kept fighting it. And so I started dialing it back and dialing it back, and I didn't run. I stopped running for a while. So I was like, okay, well, clearly that, you know, um, and I started taking the medicine again. So I was playing with I'm like, I don't feel good on the medicine because it would keep my heart rate down. So I'm like, I don't
Right.
want to feel crappy, right? And anyway, so I started doing the things and I started feeling better and I started shifting how I was working out. And I did a lot of work on this because it was like, I didn't really know another way. And so I started to shift and change and do more strength training and get away from the longer stuff. I would still ride my bike, but I was really cautious. I was started to become connected. I started to notice like, okay, back off, like, which was new, right? Like, okay, team, coach your clients and bring it back for you. Like every time, it's like this. So, yeah, I started to change how I worked out. More yoga for me was helpful because it kind of calmed
Mhm.
me down. Started to meditate, started to do more of the mindful practices. Um, and still doing some, but really watching, because for me, the tricky part is I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better. I can do more. I can, and and I have to watch that, because the minute I think I can do more, it's like, all right, well, let's just let's just so I've gone into this routine of, and now I'm running again, actually. So a little bit. I'm not okay, let's just preface running. Um uh, Pace I used to look at. Yeah. It's basically I could probably walk as I mean, I have to do it differently. I can go out and enjoy the trails. And every time I'm out there, I'm like, thank you, God. Like, I appreciate it. I have so much gratitude for being able to move my body through space and experience that. So it's different. It's right. I do some of the hit stuff. I do, some sprint, some, so I still do some of that, but very, very very structured, not overdoing and never, so I'm learning how to go from pushing through to kind of I have that, I call it the push through part. Like, that's what
Right.
gets in my way sometimes. So it's more acceptance of being in it and enjoying it. So I mean, unfortunately for me, and I can't compete today in a way I used to. Just I mean, that I have to tame. I can still get out on the pickleball court though, and I show up there and I'm like, but it shows up in little ways, and I take it and I'm like, that's good enough, and do a lot of self-talk because I have to, right? It's like, talk myself off the ledge. It's enough. I am enough today. I am, and I'm blessed that my passions can be kind of helpful for others. And that's really kind of shifted my, you know, my like how I show up and feel good, I guess, is really, yeah. And a lot of that work of oh, self-acceptance, self-love. My gosh, I didn't know what that was. I didn't, really understand true self-care,
Right.
like, yeah. So,
What inspired you to work with women in the menopause space?
yeah. So again, going back to kind of what happened to me, I just wanted to learn. I was like, something's going on. I don't know what it is. I was already in the nutrition and health coaching space and working with women there. So I had come into working with a few women who are really having trouble. Um, and I was curious. And then I'm like, well, I'm right, this might be happening for me. And it was, sure enough. And so selfishly, for myself, right, I was like, I got to understand what the heck is going on. And so I took an advanced, like a certification in hormone health. And it was like, whoa, it just blew my mind. And it led me down to research more. Um, and then one of the clients that I was working with happened to work for a group of OB doctors,
Mhm.
and they were looking for someone to help with their patients, with nutrition counseling and exercise, and they would do their part, and so anyway, I developed this class that I would give to their patients, and I was like, well, why not just open, once I got it under my belt, and then sure enough, well, my clients kind of age with me, where I work with women around the same time, and so everybody's like, what are you doing? I want, what, and so I would just start sharing, and then before I knew it, it just kind of enveloped and me, and it became kind of all, I was like, this is my space. This is where I can help women. And it's interesting to kind of speak it out loud. I mean, I guess I don't have a hard time saying, speaking it, but it's interesting to see the reaction and the response. Some women are like, whoa. So, and then secretly women will be like, I'm really glad you're talking about this. And so, yeah, so it just kind of evolved, and I kept getting these kind of, ping, 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 and so, yeah, it's really been, and now my workouts, and I have to say, thanks to you and Stacy Sims too, for encouraging that. I had started doing heavy lifting with my clients. I'm like, we have to shift. Anyway, so between the workouts and the nutrition side of it and the self-care, I mean, and so having that knowledge of what's going on, and then I always say I have to stay in my lane because, I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe hormones. So I'm in the natural space. Like, I can support you here. And there's a lot of women that want that and need that, most of us, no matter what our decisions are around, hormone therapy. So yeah, that's how I got into it, was kind of selfishly, and then, ends up I can help others in that space too. So that's been really cool. Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to say to this audience that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think, and I wrote the book, and a lot of the feedback that I've received from women, even if you're an athlete or you're not an athlete, or you're just, in this world, I think as a woman going through this transition, I think these symptoms that show up for us can be really confusing and really hard to pinpoint. Like, it's like, is it menopause, or is it just that I'm depressed and anxious, or, gosh, or I'm eating too, it's this, how do we navigate this? And not over identify, but not underestimate the power that this time in our lives has over our well-being and health and longevity. And I'm super glad, like, there's this platform, that you've created, and it's coming more into the forefront. And we have to understand what we eat, breathe, move, and how we take care of ourselves at this time is really important, and has to change to a certain degree, right? We're not in those 30-year-old or, year-old bodies anymore. And yet we have this body that we've been given, and we can nurture it and take care of it in a way, I think, that we can age beautifully and gracefully. I mean, I think that there's a lot of hopelessness out there, and we are enough. And I know that in this phase of life, we can, as we transition through going from having the main purpose of having babies, bringing them up, and then letting them go, it's like, now what? A lot of women are, that now what? And we have our sport, if you're an athlete, or, hopefully you're physically fit, or using that in your life. But it's this underlying kind of like, finding that space in each of us, that I'm worth it. I'm worth taking care of. I'll tell you what I do, Celine, every morning. I wake up and I look in that mirror and I tell myself, like, you are worth taking care of today. And I mean, that sounds really, blah, blah, out there, and whatever it is. But I think so many women today might be looking in the mirror like, God, I'm less than, I used to be this, and I'm not that anymore. And whether it's a sport or whatever, it's like, okay, well, what can I be today? Like, what's possible? And I think it's important to not set limits on ourselves at this stage in life. I mean, it's going to change what we're going to do, but I think there's so much within each of us that we can do for ourselves and for others. And I guess that dying to be enough, if I'm working on another book, it's embracing menopause as a place that we can be more than enough, and it's kind of that time and space where we have that opportunity. It's just working with, and we might be feeling a little bit crappy in there. And it's like, okay, well, how do we kind of put it together? And I think that's I guess what I want to share, if I mean, in all this, is that we're not in control and that it's an illusion. And yet we can step into our life where we are today and do those things, all the, whether it's being active and eating healthy and doing the things that we can to nurture ourselves in this space and show up however we're supposed to and let it go. Yeah. I don't know. That's my goal. I don't do it every day perfectly by any means. I'm a work in progress.
As we all are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Okay. Well, that was something, huh? I didn't want to say too much in the intro because it's not every day you get to talk to someone who literally died, and I didn't want to give that away. But now I did want to talk a bit about the condition that she had, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM, which, according to the American Heart Association, is most often caused by abnormal genes in the heart muscle. And the genes cause the walls of the heart chamber, especially the left ventricle, to become thicker than normal. Kristin was 47 when she, in her own words, quote unquote, dropped dead at mile 9.75 into a 10-mile race. Statistics on surviving this event are 2% out of the hospital due to the timing and the small chance of coming through it without any brain damage. She is incredibly fortunate to be here. And at the end of the interview, she talks about how potentially being in perimenopause played a role in the event, and research bears that out. The literature shows that though this condition can occur in both women and men, females are at greater risk of HCM-related complications and death. They also tend to run into trouble later than men, around the time of menopause and beyond, and those changes in estrogen levels may be playing a role here. And I just think that that's really important for anyone to know if they have this condition, and I'll put links to all of that in the show notes as well. Okay, so next week, we are smashing powerlifting records with the amazing Michelle Carlson of Strength Elevated Coaching. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.